Talk about everything, play music in between. Tune in and enjoy Chad's underground scene. Talking music, you know what I mean. Tune in and enjoy Chad's underground scene.
Welcome to Chad's Underground Scene with my special guest, Randall Michelson. How you doing, Michael? We are here in the heart of Hollywood, one of my favorite places. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
I've been a photographer for a long time. Lately, I've shot a lot of music. I was the house photographer at the Wiltern Theater for 8 years, at the Greek Theater for about 8 years. Now I'm at the Hollywood Bowl, and I also shoot concerts all over the country and especially here in LA.
Yeah, you're one of my favorite photographers, and you shoot some of the best shows. So let's start with how you got started, because I think it was architectural photography.
Yes, when I started, I was doing commercial photography and architectural photography with a big 4x5 camera with the black cloth you throw over your head and look at the big screen upside down, and you have to be very careful and spend a lot of time on those images, and it really taught me a lot about lighting and composition and keeping out the crap from the picture. Maybe.
Yeah, it seems so interesting to me because I take photos of buildings that I see or something that I see that's architectural, and when I go back and look at it, it doesn't look the same as when I saw it. Yeah. And then I'll look at an ad or I'll look at something in a magazine and I'll go, oh my God, I want to go there now, whatever it is, right? And that's the photography that does that. So
yeah, it invites you in if it's working.
Yeah, amazing. So then from there, you ended up doing bands and lots and lots of bands. So can you tell me the connection? Because I hear there's a connection between that photography and you ending up doing...
Yeah, well, I always did a lot of artistic photography, and when I was a kid, I was a roadie for Alice Cooper. But after I shot architectural pictures of the Wiltern, many years later, I got a call from them, and they said, we're redoing the theater. We're taking the theater seats out of the bottom level and making tiered levels so people could stand, get more people in there. And would you do some more architecture pictures for us? And I said, sure. And then a few days later, Rena Wasserman, the manager of the Wiltern, called me up and said, would you be interested in shooting the bands every night?
Oh, how cool.
Right down at the Wiltern, 10 minutes away. And so I became the house photographer at the Wiltern. And in those early months, they had an incredible set of shows, including the Chili Peppers and Bob Dylan and the Rolling Stones and people like that. So it was quite an introduction to that part of it.
Amazing, yeah. That's what a great break that was. So, and you jumped right on it.
Oh yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what it was like to roadie for Alice Cooper. That has to be a cool story and lots of fun.
Well, it was a lot of fun and quite an education. I was young. I was in UCLA at the time, and I wanted to become a writer. And I really wanted to graduate because I had diddled around for a couple of years anyway. And when I first got asked to work for the band on a tour, at first I thought, no, I'm not going to do it. And then my brother-in-law Alex said to me, if you want to be a writer, this will give you something to write about. And he was definitely right.
Yes. And can you tell us some of the cool things that happened on tour and maybe some of the things that Alice Cooper taught you about life?
When we first started, Alice came up to me with a group of other guys on the road crew, and he said, I heard you dropped out of college to come on the road with us. And I said, yeah. And he said, what did you want to be when you grow up? And I said, when I grow up, I want to be a roadie. And Alice said, well, you can't do both. But I got to take care of the snake, a 6-foot boa constrictor named Ginger. Had to keep her from freezing in the cold weather up north in Fargo and Chicago and some of the other places we went. Got to see pretty much every city in the country with more than 10,000 people, a lot of college towns. It was a lot of fun, and if you keep your head on straight, you can do okay. There's a lot of attrition in the roadie world, and as people kind of dropped out or burnt out, I got higher and higher. So
yeah. It's not an easy life, right?
No. Within 3 months, I was in charge of costumes and props for Alice Cooper.
Awesome.
Which was incredible because we had a guillotine, we had a 8-foot cyclops, we had a thing that made each of the dancers look like 3 6-foot pink poodles. We had a lot of stuff to keep track of, and they changed costumes all the time.
Yeah, he was one of the innovators of all of that with the costumes and the big show, right?
Yeah, we had the
Awesome.
biggest show in rock and roll, except for Pink Floyd. They had more trucks than us, but second to Pink Floyd, we had the biggest production in rock and roll at that time.
Okay, since we are here in Hollywood, we're going to break away and do a video that I did on my recent album. I did an album that just got released called Not Alone. And this song, Hanging Out in Hollywood's on the album, and it's all about Hollywood back in the day.
Great.
And then when we come back, we'll talk about Hollywood, because you've been here for quite a while.
I have.
You went to a lot of shows, as well as I have. So enjoy the video. This is Chad Carrier, Hanging in Hollywood.
The scene is cool and underground. At 10 o'clock we get our start. By midnight we play our part. We're like vampires. We come out at night. The zombie zoo is in our sight. The death rock punks and the tragically hip. You know we never get sick of it. Friends will soon unite. We all find a club that's so right. Johnny and the Dingbats, they will play. They will play Scream or at the lingerie. Vampires, we come out at night. Release the bats, it's in our sight. A death rock punks and a tragically hip. You know we never get sick of it. Sunset Gower, Hell's Gate, zombie sluts from hell will be next. No one ever knows their sex. We're like vampires, come out at night. The zombies who is innocent. A death rock hunts and tragically hit. You know I never get sick of it. We're like vampires, come out at night. Release the bats, is innocent. A death rock hunts and tragically hit. You know I never get sick of it.
Hope you enjoyed that. Okay, we're back. So tell us a little bit about Hollywood and hanging out in the scene, because you were out there early.
When I came to Hollywood, I had been recently in England. I went to school at the University of Sussex for a year, and that was when punk rock was just kind of bubbling up. When I came to LA, I was attracted very much to the punk rock scene in Hollywood. I used to hang out at the Mask with Brendan Mullen, and he would have his little plastic record player. People would send him demos and 45s, and he'd say, "What do you think of this one?" or "What do you think of that one?" But I got to see the Germs and Joan Jett, and I knew the Go-Go's when they were first starting, and I was writing for the UCLA paper, and so I did interviews with some of those people too.
There are some cool pictures, if you go on the internet, of the Mask in the day, with all the different people hanging out there. It's such a cool place.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was not a photographer then, or I would have had some good stuff to go back on.
And there was so many clubs throughout the years. So what are some of your favorites in Hollywood?
Some of my favorites in Hollywood were Lingerie, Madame Wong's Downtown, Madame Wong's West. What were you telling me about? You mentioned a few too.
Raji's, Cathay de Grande that was kind of, to me, the replacement for the Mask. Right? Same type of crowd, same type of thing, and the bathrooms were probably just as dirty, if not worse.
Well, I come from New York, where the bathrooms are horrible. Nothing like a bathroom in Chinatown back in the day, or in a big nightclub in New York.
I was lucky to play at CBGB's, and the night I played, Talking Heads showed up and did like 2 or 3 songs while we were there. So cool.
Wow. Yeah, I saw a band called the Sick Fucks at CBGB's, or maybe Max's.
And their bathrooms were up there on that chart. Nasty.
There's a movie about Max's that we saw recently that was really cool.
Yeah, and then I was lucky. I went there the year that it closed. I was in New York, And I had a friend there, and I said, hey, there's a show at CBGB's. And he goes, what is that? He had never been.
Wow.
And I go, it's the coolest underground club in New York. And you want to go with me? He goes, that sounds great. I'm going to get some friends and we'll all go. And we all went in. And it was great. Saw some good bands. And then it was like a year later, it closed down.
Wow.
So I was there in the 80s. Then I was there again at the end. It was awesome.
Yeah, at that time, the New York sound and the LA sound were completely different. The New York sound was less violent and energetic, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In LA, they're much more demonstrative and running around the stage and jumping in the crowd and stuff like that.
Yeah, and even here you had different scenes, right? You had the LA scene, Hollywood scene, and you had the Orange County scene, right?
Yeah.
San Francisco scene. They were different. Like the punk bands in LA, more serious. They're more serious bands, but a little heavier. Orange County, a little more fun and crazy and silly,
yeah,
right?
Really crazy, yeah. And people would come up from Orange County to go to the clubs.
Yeah, you go
on
back
a
and
regular
forth.
basis. Yeah.
Yeah, I was lucky to be able to play both, and it was awesome. And I was accepted by both. It was great. So maybe tell us a crazy story about something that happened at any of these clubs that you hung out at.
Ooh. We would hang out. We would go to the liquor store, which was called Playboy Liquors. And I remember hanging out there a couple of times with Joan Jett. And was it her sister or cousin or something like that? Whatever. And, literally drinking in the parking lot or walking back to the Mask with a half bottle of something. And it was a lot of fun. Met a lot of people. For years, Brendan, every time I saw Brendan, he goes, how's UCLA? And I'd been out of UCLA for years, It was just something that was in his head. I remember some of the shows, they used to just set off fireworks spontaneously. It was just like, make you crazy indoors without any kind of control.
Oh, right.
They're nuts, these people. But it was so spontaneous and so fun, and the people were great. But unfortunately, there were people who got tangled up here and there. The original bass player for the Go-Go's named Margot.
Yeah.
Great girl, but they had to cut her loose. And then came Kathy Valentine, and the rest is history.
So speaking of pyrotechnics, which is super funny, in the 80s, I was playing in this band Easter, and we did quite a few shows, and we came up with this idea because it was in pyrotechnics. All the 80s bands were doing it, all the hair bands were doing it, and so we came across this guy, and he goes, hey, I could do pyrotechnics for your guys. And I go, that's awesome. So we got this guy, and he did several shows, and it was awesome. He was really good. And then my cousin saw the whole thing, and he goes, you know what? I think I could do that for you guys at that show you're going to do at Fender's Ballroom, right? And I go, you sure about this? And he goes, yeah, dude, I watched everything he did. I got it all figured out. So we do this show at Fender's Ballroom, and he's got lighter fluid and all these different things all set up for the pyrotechnics, and my guitar's going to catch on fire. So we get on stage, we're playing, and he does a couple of the firework things go off, and then he lights the guitar on fire, and the next thing I'm looking around going, this is not working out. I'm on fire. So I jumped on the floor and did the old roll, tuck and roll, and we put it out. And we decided we don't know how to do the pyrotechniques like that guy did.
No. Oh, I do have one good Go-Go's story. It was the very first real Go-Go's gig. They had it at the Park Plaza, which eventually became Power Tools.
Yeah, Power Tools.
The site where Power Tools and a bunch of stuff was. And it was the first time on a big show that I saw that people were pogoing, they called it,
pogo,
jumping up and down and bumping into each other. That became the mosh pit thing. Somebody called it in as a riot, and maybe 50 cops showed up.
Oh, nice.
And did the whole phalanx where they come in a big like swatter wheel of cops,
and then they're pushing
sweeping everybody out. That was the very first Go-Go's show.
I went to many shows like that and played quite a few shows where the cops showed and did that to us and shut it down. Interesting stuff. Yeah. So then you did quite a bit of photography. I would run into you quite a bit at Wiltern and different other shows where you were hired to do photos, and you did a lot of great photos like these at those shows. So tell us about those shows and how those work out, and how you come about to get such good photos. Because when you see the photo, it's as if you were actually at the concert watching, and you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right, you can feel the moment that it happens, like this one here where he's got that guitar, he's playing a chord up here, right? It's interesting how you could capture that exact moment.
My background was really in studio photography, and from the beginning, I wanted the concert pictures, some of them anyway, to look like I was shooting the people in the studio. So at the Wiltern, rather than set up in the pit, looking straight up people's noses and crotches, I set up on the first level of the tiers that they had built, and I was just about eye level with the performer. And it's always been my goal to get that kind of portrait of people. And long lenses, very, very fine focus, all done manually if you want it done right. And that's the way I like to work. You want to get the atmosphere, but you also want to get a really good portrait, especially of a special artist. When you're the house photographer at a place like the Wiltern, it's very important to do the best work that you can when it's most important. When we shot Bowie at the Wiltern, you knew it was the only time David Bowie was coming to the Wiltern ever.
Yeah.
And after I did my 3 songs, I came out of there. We were on the back. I was on a ladder with a super long lens. And I was sweating. And the manager said to me, "Randall, are you okay? You're dripping with sweat." And I said, "David Bowie comes to your venue once in a lifetime. You better come back with good pictures."
Oh, get it right, yeah.
Yeah. No offense to all the Trachtenberg family slideshow bands of the world, but you have to do your best when it's most important, especially when you're the house photographer, because those are the shows that they feature and they remember forever.
So I'm interested. I do some photography, but I don't know a lot about the post-production part of it. So how much of it is in post-production to make this photo look so great?
There is some work in post-production. It's a combination. The important thing is when you're doing effects or post-production that you make it true to the spirit of the artist. So it's not gratuitous or whatever you want to call it, frivolous or just showing off. Sometimes there are photographers who make everybody look the same.
Yeah.
You ever seen people's portfolios where no matter what they're shooting, it looks the same? To me, that means it's about the photographer.
Yeah,
You want to do my goal is to communicate what the artists and their relationship with their fans and their music is. Sometimes when I'm editing, and I don't relate to the band, I have to send the pictures to somebody's kid who's a big fan of that artist.
Okay. Yeah,
and I ask them, which
great.
ones do you like? I'll make a selection of 40 or 50 and say, which ones kind of communicate this artist to you? Because it's important. You're shooting for the fans of that particular artist primarily. And so I do post-production. Sometimes I take out things like ugly water bottles or stuff that's in the way.
Yeah.
It's always been my philosophy, like Michelangelo said when he did a sculpture, I just take away everything that's not the PA top. I try to take away everything that's not a good picture if it's in the way.
Oh, no, okay, yeah. So you do get some photos where there's something there, you're like, because I've done that quite a few times, right? Where I look at a photo later and I'm like, I didn't notice that was there.
And sometimes, like something like this, there's just 2 photos of the same show. One very long exposure that's
and then you overlap them into each other.
and then you just layer it on top of Tom Petty and erase it. And this one too of Jay-Z. Rappers are hard to shoot because they always have the microphone jammed in their mouth. And a lot of times with people like that or with different singers, the song highlight is not necessarily the photographic highlight or the best picture of the artist. Sometimes you have to wait till they pull the mic away and look at the crowd. And
So
what
were some of your favorite people to photograph?
Well,
and maybe something that just made you remember that show, and probably not one that you were like, oh my God, I love this band. It might be a band that you don't know much about and you just saw and were like, oh, that's unbelievable.
well, I remember I wasn't that much of a fan of Motorhead when they played at the Wiltern. Mm-hmm. Motorhead is famous for being the loudest band you ever heard. Yeah. They blow everybody's ears out. I remember when they first started, somebody came running out of the Wiltern holding their head like this. And inevitably, Lemmy would stand up after the third song and he'd say, "Can you hear us okay?" Also,
and then turn it up.
Yeah. And also at that show, I remember coming out after doing a series, photographing a series of songs of Motorhead, and there was a young guy on the ground, and the paramedics were treating him, and I said, "What happened?" They said, "Somebody threw a chair and hit him in the head." And I went, "Oh." And then I thought, there are no chairs
in here
down there. You know, there's seats upstairs, but they're bolted down. And I said, there are no chairs here. How did he get hit in the head with the chair? And they said, there are chairs in the handicap section. And everybody started laughing because somebody in the handicap section had gotten life and started throwing their chairs around. And,
good for them.
But I think the guy was okay. You know, it's all part of being at a show.
Rock and roll. That's rock and roll. Yeah, Fender's Ballroom was my spot where weird stuff happened. We did that thing where I caught on fire. Another show, I don't know, some of you out there probably will know Fender's Ballroom. But Fender's Ballroom, on the stage, they had a high stage, and down the middle of the stage there was a beam. A lot of the bands, they would hang on this beam and do stuff. Right. And I'm in the middle of the show, and I jump up, and I hit my head on that beam, and it knocks me out. And our band's still playing. And then I came to, and I was like, wow, what is going on? And then I just get up, and I finish the song, right? And then after the show, we're in the green room, and everyone's like, dude, I don't know what you were doing out there, but it was the coolest thing when you did that thing where you laid down under the drums and got back up. And I was like, it was real easy. I just knocked myself out.
It's a punk rock moment.
Yeah.
Very spontaneous. That is what was fun back then.
Oh, yeah.
Is that things would happen because you were trying so hard and so into it and right in the moment, and and it got communicated.
And so much of that happened at the smaller venues and the small shows, right?
Yes.
Lingerie, there's something fun happened every night you go there.
Yeah.
That's what made those clubs, right? And that scene.
Yeah. And great bands.
Yes, and so many good bands and all the different styles. I did like a lot of the hair bands that were hanging out on Sunset, right? They had some cool stuff going on.
Yeah, and Rodney Bingenheimer from K-Rock. I got to mention Rodney.
Oh, yes, yeah. He
was a guy that played a lot of the bands, especially the ones from New York that I heard for the first time. And he helped create that scene on Sunset with the hair bands and Bowie and Blondie and that kind of stuff, and he really made it fun.
Yeah, he broke our band Easter, and he played Love Dog as well, and we also were able to play the English Disco, which was super cool.
Rodney's English Disco.
And we have some pictures of that with him. It was awesome. Such good times. Mm-hmm. All right, so we will break away for another video. This one we filmed right on Sunset Strip. This one is called Steady Rockers by Easter. Enjoy.
Steady rockers. Steady rockers.
nobody knows. Nobody knows. Let me tell you about the boys and girls in their leather coats. Leather coats, voices down all, cigarette butts on the floor. I gotta make that phone call down at the liquor store. Hollywood Boulevard, 1:15. Your shirt collars up, signing tours, staying up all half the night. Could there be a little bit more? Steady rockers. You gotta win now, you gotta beat 'em now, you gotta show them that you know. You gotta win now, you gotta beat 'em now, you gotta show them that you know. I'm gonna win now, I'm gonna show 'em now, I'm gonna show them that I know. You gotta win now, you gotta beat 'em now, you gotta show them that you know. Steady, steady, steady.
All right, so over the years, there's been a lot of good photographers that have come through LA area and California. And one of them that comes to mind for me is Ed Culver, because he was in the punk scene. He was recording everything that was out there, all the different bands playing. He was at every show. He was taking pictures and documenting it, right? Because otherwise we would not remember except for what we saw, right? And he took so many great photos. And then he also did, like John Scarpati, did a lot of album covers. And is there other photographers, or do you know his work?
I do know Ed's work. We've been in a couple of shows together. Our work has been in a couple of shows together. My main inspiration at that time were artists, people that I knew here in LA and people that I knew from New York. Andy Warhol, Basquiat, Keith Haring, Clemente. There's a picture, actually, of Keith Haring and Francesco Clemente. They came to a show that I had in New York at the Red Zone, which was really cool. And I mainly took inspiration from artists like Charles Bojorquez in LA, a great graffiti artist, the grandfather of graffiti art as an art form in LA, and worked with Chaz a lot. He's still doing great stuff. His work is, among other places, in the Smithsonian. It's so important. And my main inspiration as a photographer came from Man Ray, who I think is the greatest photographer ever. I love the projection stuff, I love the movie stuff, and really took a lot of inspiration from Man Ray.
And do you use some of his techniques?
I do. I use a lot of
photography.
Yes, I use a lot of Man Ray projection techniques. I have here in the studio 5 or 6 slide projectors with patterns I project on people, and it's really a cool thing to do. Yeah,
because music is kind of the same. You take inspiration from different artists and you kind of make it your own way. I really like the way they play that. I like the way they sing that, right? And you use it. You don't steal it, but you kind of use it. You go, I like that technique, and then you make it to your own, right? It's interesting, and I think photography would be real similar. Because there's so many different approaches you can take.
Yes. I had a complex when I was starting out in photography that photography wasn't really art, that you were just standing there with a camera. So I made it a point to paint my own sets and create my own set of projections that I could use as lighting and try to make it anything but just standing in front of something with a camera.
Right, yeah.
And I made that work in the studio and had some shows in Japan and New York and Paris and stuff like that.
Interesting. So let's see. What are some of the favorite artists that you've done photography with and maybe seen live without doing photography, because you can probably appreciate it a little bit better, right?
Some of the bands I was a huge fan of before I started taking pictures, like The Who, and I've gotten to photograph The Who a few times, and I've actually met Pete Townsend a few times. Pete's great. As I said, I worked for Alice Cooper, so I made sure I get a good portrait of Alice because he's my friend. And we saw David Bowie at the Wiltern, as I mentioned before. We got to go back to the second night and just watch the show.
And watch the show. They're
Yeah,
perfect.
and that was great. And then another quite memorable show was a series of shows in 2017, I think it was, that Tom Petty did at the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh, nice.
And they were amazing shows. They had, it was the Heartbreakers' 40th anniversary. After a song or two, Petty said, we've been playing together for 40 years. Think of this show as the one side of a giant vinyl record, and I will drop the needle here and there along those 40 years of songs and play those songs tonight. And people were in heaven. Petty also gave us great access. At the Hollywood Bowl, a lot of times we're only in the back. Petty gave us great access. And then unfortunately he got ill the very next day after the third of those shows, and they unplugged him a couple of days later.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
those are
that
his
was
very last
So that
shows.
was the very last one, yeah.
Very last shows that Tom Petty did. And
Yeah, he's one of my favorites. So my sister brought me when I was a kid to go see Tom Petty, and it was great. It was great. That was what was the name of that tour? I can't remember the name of the tour, but that was in the 70s, right? And he kept going, new album, and that's what I love about a lot of artists is I like new music. And I love artists that stay relevant and they keep writing more songs.
yeah.
And he, to the end, still was writing good songs.
It's all about the songs. You know, I
Yeah.
remember hearing Quincy Jones give a talk at the Grammy Museum, which had recently opened, and he said, he was talking about, I think it was We Are the World or something like that, and he said, there's three things that make a great song. He said, the song, and the song.
The song, yeah. and I was lucky to be an inspiration to one of his songs, which was
Wow.
a whole weird thing. We were playing at a place called Zombie Zoo. I don't know if you remember that, but it was an underground club in Hollywood at Osco's.
Ah, okay.
At the Cave, right? It was underneath there. And it had moved for this particular time, because they were closing Osco's, it had moved to the Probe. So we were at the Probe playing, and after the show, we go, hey, let's go over to Ships and get something to eat. We were kind of hungry, right? So we go in there, and I leave the table, and I go down to the bathroom, and I'm standing at the urinal, and Tom Petty walks in. And he looks at me, and he goes, hey, are you the band that played in the club next door? And I go, yeah, that was my band. He goes, can you stand here for just a minute? And he runs out, and he comes back with a napkin that he got from the waitress and a pen.
Oh, wow.
And he goes, what was the name of that club? And I go, it's the Zombie Zoo. And he goes, Zombie Zoo, that's what I thought. And he's writing it down on the napkin. And he goes, hey, I got some friends here that you probably want to meet. He goes, when you go back upstairs, I'll go get you from your table, and I'll bring you over, introduce you to my friends. So I go back up to the table, and he comes wandering over, and he goes, hey, come on over. They're all sitting at the table over here. And he goes, this is my friend George Harrison. This is my friend Jeff Lynne. And he's introducing me to the Traveling Wilburys, right?
Jeez.
And then George Harrison and his wife was there as well. And this is my wife. And they were super nice. And then the next year, his new album came out and it had a song on it called Zombie Zoo.
Wow. That's great. No, Petty was a great guy. I remember not that long ago, Sam Smith came out with a song, and it turned out it was the same song
Yeah.
that Petty had written. I think it was Waiting is the Hardest Part, something like
Oh,
that. But
yeah.
you could hear it immediately. When I had one of my parties here at the studio, I put the songs on back to back because I knew right away.
I think that was the song the first time when I went to see him. That was one of the songs on the record, right?
Yeah. But,
Damn the Torpedoes, I think, was the tour.
well, what happened is that the publishers wanted to make a big lawsuit and a big thing out of it, and Petty said, forget about it. It happens. It's cool. And not many musicians and writers
Oh, yeah.
are willing to do that. Very, very cool about stuff like that.
Yeah, so I was lucky. Tom Petty, I saw Queen. My uncle introduced me to David Bowie when I was a kid. He brought me to see David Bowie, and when I saw him, I go, I think I know what I want to do. I want to play music.
How old were you at the time?
Oh, I must have been like 13.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
14.
you go.
And he brought me to see him, see Kiss, and Queen. Great shows.
Queen had a big show
Yeah.
at that time, too. I had friends that were roadies at the same time I was for Queen, and they had a crazy show. You know, Freddie was still around, and big production with a big, stuff that came down from the ceiling and things like that.
Yeah, it was awesome. And then some of my favorites, I like Iggy Pop is one of my favorite artists to go see live. He is one of the few that I've seen multiple times, quite a few times, and never had a bad show. Every show is great.
Yeah.
He's all in 100% in every show.
Yeah, what I tell people about Iggy is that in every show, no matter where it is, at some point in the show, he will just jump into the audience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I saw him. He played the Palladium about 4 years ago. And at the Palladium, from the stage to where the audience is, there's got to be probably a 5-6 foot gap.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
More than that, yeah.
And he just heaved
Barricade,
himself
yeah.
from that over the barricade into the audience.
And you know that one time out of 100, people are just going to stand back and
Oh, yeah.
it's going to go splat.
He's going to miss.
But he does it anyway. I love Iggy, and he's a great guy. And it's also interesting to hear him talk as James Osterberg. He's
Yeah.
got this little
Yeah, how you guys doing?
low radio voice like that, very serious. I love those artists that have the double personality. Moby's like that too. He's like an intellectual, and then when he's on stage, he's nuts.
And then yet another one who's still relevant, right? Iggy Pop puts out a new album just about every year.
Yeah.
And it's always good. There's always good songs on there. And then he even changes the band a little bit, right? So you get something a little different, a little new. It's cool.
Yeah, I saw him play at the Greek with Josh Homme from Eagles of Death
Yeah.
Metal and the Seattle scene, and
Yeah, and the Queens of the Stone Age guys.
Queens of the Stone
yeah.
Age. Yeah, big guy. Good thing he stood behind Iggy for the pictures,
Yeah.
because he was so much taller, and when he's behind, it's not so bad. You don't want to have
That's
the
right.
big guy in the front and the little guy in the back, especially if the little guy's the star.
Yeah, it's funny. So tell us a little bit about what you have planned going forward, because we're finally back to doing live shows, and we can do the photography again, right? Because we've been shut down for a little while.
Yeah.
And what did you do in the meantime?
We've been doing live shows again at the Hollywood Bowl, a few. Caught the end of the season a little bit. I also, during the pandemic, put together 4 books of my photographs, one on the Wiltern, one on the Greek, one on the Bowl, and one of all the other stuff that I've shot all over the country.
Oh, cool. So
And
you kept busy like I did. I was writing songs and recording.
And I put them in a box set here with some prints and some coasters and some other stuff.
Ah,
and
so cool.
Selling these box sets. So that's my new project that I'm working on right now. I make a lot of prints for the Live Nation offices around the country of artists that I've shot. And a lot of big canvas prints. But big ones too, like Willie. And
Yeah. I'm hoping the The programs are coming back. I saw Pretenders a few years back, and they were selling little program books and they were like 10 or 12 pages of live photography of them, right? It's so cool.
That's an old school thing. I remember guys like Johnny Mathis used to do stuff like that.
Yeah, now they're sending them out. If you can buy the box set of their albums, and it comes with the photos from all the different shows. It's really cool.
Yeah, it used to be a big thing that the fans of the band, that was the main merch that they had.
Oh yeah,
at gigs before they did a lot of T-shirts.
Yeah,
they would sell photo books of the artist and make it very personal, and they would all be clutching them during the show.
Yeah, which is super cool. I have a little man cave at home, and one of the shelves of I get a bunch of those books from different artists. I love it. And I love thumbing through the big album covers with the different pages.
Yeah, I don't have them anymore, but when I was a kid, I had a collection of programs from the Fillmore East of the shows that I saw when I was very young.
Nice. That was a great venue.
Yeah, yeah. I actually saw Jimi Hendrix play with Band of Gypsies there on New Year's in 1969-70.
All right, we would like to thank you all for coming out to Chad's Underground Scene with my special guest, Randall Michelson. And we're going to end the show with a little video of Iggy Pop. Actually, it's not Iggy Pop. This is Iggy Pop's song, I Want to Be Your Dog, that was on my 2 albums ago, Chad-Carrier Legend. And this is I Want to Be Your Dog. Enjoy, and remember, it all starts in the underground.
Close my mind. Now I'm ready to feel your hand and to lose my heart in the burning sand. Now I wanna be your dog. Now I wanna be your dog. Now I wanna be your dog. Messed up, I want you here in my room. I want you here, and now we're gonna be face to face, and I lay right down in my favorite place, and now I wanna be a dog. Now I wanna be your dog. Now I wanna be your dog. We talk about everything, play music in between. Till